Welcome back. The French have been voting in an election that will decide whether pro-European Union centrist President Emmanuel Macron keeps his job or if he is unseated by the far-right Eurosceptic Marine Le Pen. Earlier on, we spoke to the ambassador of France to South Africa about the importance of what's happening in France today.
There are two very different visions of the French society and the French foreign policy. Emmanuel Macron, as you know, is very internationally oriented, very business oriented, a lot of ambition for the relations with the African continent. Marine Le Pen, of course, she comes from the extreme right, so it's more a nationalistic approach. And also it's quite unknown because we had never had such a candidate in France. So we'll see what happens, but the consequences for the foreign policy could be huge indeed.
Well, voting began early this morning and the current President Macron was leading with a small margin. Let's get the latest now. We're joined by Rosie Bichard from the French capital, Paris. Thank you for being with us, Rosie. So everybody's watching this with interest. I've been seeing some concerns about a possible low voter turnout. How's it looking right now?
Well, the voter turnout as of 5 p.m. local time was around 63%. So perhaps it could be something similar to what we saw in the first round of these elections 2 weeks ago, which was around 73% at the end of that first round. We don't have the final figures yet, but the polls will close in less than 2 hours' time, and that is when we will get that first glimpse of who the French have chosen to give the keys of the Élysée Palace to, who they've chosen to be their president for the next 5 years. Now, of course, that turnout question is also very important, highly on the minds of both of those candidates who are vying to become president of France, because they need those votes in order to secure their pathway to the Élysée Palace. Something that's certainly high on either of their minds, we imagine, is trying to scoop up the votes of the far leftist challenger Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who in the first round of these elections managed to secure 1 in 5 votes. He hasn't made it to this second round. So Macron and Le Pen, both the incumbent and the challenger, have been courting the left over the past 2 weeks, trying to get some of those votes that went to that left candidate, Mélenchon, in the first round, over to their camp, into the ballot box with their name on it, to try and secure that win.
Macron went in with a comfortable lead, I understand. Can he be very comfortable with that, sit on his laurels? It would be seen as something of an upset if Marine Le Pen came in, am I correct?
It would be seen as an upset. When campaigning ended on Friday, the last polling suggested that Macron had a lead of around 10 or 12 points. However, that is still a much tighter race than we saw in 2017. It was the same challenger and face-off. So we saw Macron and Le Pen also go head-to-head 5 years ago. But then Macron secured a landslide victory over Le Pen, and now this familiar rival is back, and the margin is much narrower. Whether or not he does win, and as you said, the polling suggests he will get this win later today when the polls close. Still, Marine Le Pen, the far-right challenger, has increased her share of the vote, suggesting she has managed to attract more French voters with her policy propositions.
Remind us of some of the key election issues. It said these candidates are very different, so tell us their stance on those issues as well.
Well, Marine Le Pen, who is the challenger, has been trying to really criticise Emmanuel Macron for failing to manage a cost of living crisis here in France, and that's certainly high on a lot of voters' minds. Energy prices have spiked, and many people are struggling to cope with the costs of day-to-day life, and it's particularly regarding their energy bills. Now, Emmanuel Macron, on the other hand, has criticised Marine Le Pen. He has denounced her policies as racist. Some of her propositions include banning Muslim women from wearing headscarves in public and clamping clamping down on immigration. So there are really some of these diametrically opposed views here, not just different visions of France domestically, but also very different visions, as the ambassador said, of how France should be in the world. Marine Le Pen, famously Eurosceptic. She formally advocated for France to leave the European Union. She softened that policy for this election and is now advocating instead for more power to be returned from Brussels back to Paris. And while that might not sound that radical, it does really mean tearing up the rule book and rewriting some of the treaties that founded the European Union. Emmanuel Macron, on the other hand, ardently pro-European and one of the biggest advocates of taking on common joint debt among EU countries during the coronavirus pandemic. So entirely different visions, and that is what French voters behind me at this polling station now have to choose between, two entirely different visions and plans for what their country should be domestically and on the world stage.
Yeah, deciding France's place in the world, essentially. All right, quickly tell us about timelines. When will the final results be announced?
We'll get the final results in around just over an hour's time. That stage we'll get a projection which should give us an idea of who the winner is, unless the margin is incredibly tight, in which case we might not find out until tomorrow. But we are expecting to have, within the next 2 hours, quite a clear idea of who will, as I said, get those keys to the Elysee Palace and become the French president for the next 5 years.
All right, please watch those results for us. Thank you very much. Live from Paris, Rosie Bichard.